Thank you for joining us on our QTV Business and Economy program. The Business and Economy program is intended to promote the ideals of a corporate Gambia identity with the objective of forging partnerships through dialogue between the public and the private sector, civil society organizations, and the international community. In today's episode, we shall be discussing pressing issues on diplomacy and necessarily issues of relevance to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Gambians abroad. We will be getting the perspective of a renowned diplomat who has served in the foreign service within the administrations of President Jawara, President Jammeh, and President Adama Barrow. We will also discuss what to make of the recent just concluded Russia-Africa summit. Are we seeing a rebirth of the scramble for Africa, but in a different context? Is Africa and the AU aware of the impending geopolitical issues and challenges, which is of relevance in terms of the negotiations as to the proposals that Russia is putting forward? These, amongst others, would inform our discussion over the next 1 hour. To help us in our discussions, join me in welcoming His Excellency Alhaji Dembo Baji. Your Excellency, a warm welcome to the Business and Economy program.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Happy to be here.
Your Excellency, I want to kickstart this interview by getting on your perspective on diplomacy and the experiences of the Foreign Service. And here I want to go as far back as the post-independence era, when our diplomacy and diplomatic service was just budding. What experiences and lessons have we gathered over the years, and how would you characterize our diplomacy today relative to, say, the Jawara and the Jammeh era? Because this is an area that, you know, I can pretty much say is your forte.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roberts, for inviting me to this program and to talk about an area that is of keen interest to me. Well, diplomacy during the First Republic, that is the Jawara era, was taking the form of more of career diplomacy than what we have now. I mean, diplomats were properly groomed, properly trained before they are even posted out to our missions. Because it's important to train diplomats to understand the international context and to understand the geopolitical situation of the various parts of the world so that they can become effective in the discharge of their functions. So we had in the First Republic more of career diplomats than now that every Tom, Dick and Harry is just thrown into the diplomatic service. And so they become clueless and cannot make the useful impact for the country. So this is the difference between the Jawara government or the First Republic and the Second Republic. Second Republic too, for a number of years, career development was maintained in the foreign service, but after some time, it turned out in a different way, whereby the foreign ministry became the dumping ground. Anyone who is kicked out of government at the top level, you are asked to go and report to the foreign ministry. And the foreign ministry continued to be burdened by as to where to place them, you know, as ambassador or as any member of the diplomatic service. So they go there to fill the space, but cannot make any impact because they don't have the skills, they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the training, you know, they will not know how to enter into negotiations, they will not know what is bilateral, what is multilateral, what is joint commission, joint communique, heads of state meeting. They have no idea about these issues, and yet they are thrown in the foreign service. So the foreign service now, as at now, Second Republic, most part of it, and then this republic has become a dumping ground. for the unwanted in other parts of the government. Another aspect also, people were posted from other ministries to the foreign ministry, and they are further posted abroad to our diplomatic missions. Somebody from agriculture ministry, who is not foreign service trained, who is not diplomatically trained, is posted to the foreign ministry from Ministry of Agriculture. So he goes there and he hangs around until he gets posted into one of our missions abroad. So that is not good. If you are talking about manpower development, it has to be people who are specialized in international relations or in any field, but posted to the foreign ministry and properly trained before they are sent to diplomatic missions. Then they can know what to do when they are out there. But just from any ministry and any department, you just dump them there, they become clueless. And so we have a clueless environment in our diplomatic service, and therefore the results for the Gambia are very minimal. They would not achieve much because the skills are not there.
You made two important points. The fact that under the Jawara regime and during his entire tenure, that people who found themselves in the foreign service or within the diplomatic corps were properly trained, were career diplomat, and understood parameters of geopolitics as a result of the career diplomat orientation and the training. I even recall when I was a child and even growing up, I have heard people make the statement, and I believe there is some truth to it, that the former chief of protocol of Senegal, now late, actually had a stint in terms of capacitization, in the Gambia. So that just goes to underscore the point that you are making. Now, in view of this reality that obtained under the Jawara administration, and in view of the realities that obtained at the latter part, or well, the majority part of President Jammeh's tenure, and considering the new Gambia dispensation now, and here let me just go back in terms of what obtains now in terms of the foreign service being a dumping ground, and having been a dumping ground for a good portion of President Jammeh's regime, what do you think could be done at the level of the executive? And primarily here I'm talking about the Foreign Affairs Ministry. Honorable Tangara, who is the current Minister of Foreign Affairs, I can say has also been in the diplomatic service for some time. He has served as the UN representative of the Gambia, in New York. So given his experience, would you think that perhaps now, under the new Gambia dispensation level, that initiative should have been taken to sort of, take us back to what obtained during the Jawara regime?
Yes, that should have been the case, but it depends in the context in which Tangara is operating as a foreign minister. Because even though he might be very aware of the shortfalls within the diplomatic service as a result of the dumping of Tom, Dick and Harry in the service, as a result of poorly trained manpower for the diplomatic service, the question is whether there is the political will to send the proper people to the foreign service. Because if you wake up in the morning and the executive tells you that Mr. XYZ are kicked out of government and they are now posted to the foreign ministry, what can you say? So the best thing is for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to come with a policy paper that will be discussed in cabinet to let government know that if you want our foreign service to make the necessary impact, if you want us to meet our national goals and objectives through our foreign policy, this is what it takes. for the system to work. I need properly qualified, trained Gambians to be in our foreign ministry and to be in our diplomatic service. So the danger of sending using here as a dumping ground is that it will make no impact for us in terms of what we want to achieve abroad as a nation. So, and guidelines should be spelled out exactly as to what type of people should serve in the diplomatic service of the Gambia. These policy initiatives can come from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to government, and once it is approved, considered and approved by government, it becomes a policy. And in that process, we will be able to even start developing career diplomas, because then proper people, qualified people, would be posted to the foreign ministry, and they will get the necessary training, skills to qualify them to serve in our missions. This is very important. It's either that, or within the context of the civil service reform, I don't know whenever that will come or that will be finalized, but within the context of the civil service reform, then this element of foreign service could come in and be properly reflected in such a reform.
You made you proffered a solution in terms of the current challenges that obtain within the foreign service, in terms of the Honorable Minister putting forward a cabinet paper, in which he would try to realign, if you will, or revamp the foreign service as we know it. And I think it is equally apt and untimely as well. But sort of latching onto that point, I want to ask, what is the foreign policy position of the country, as it were? I mean, I've asked this question before, and I know that it may sound perhaps a little bit surprising, coming from me, who has served as a former minister in the Jammeh regime. But what is the foreign position? Foreign policy position of the Gambia? And I ask this because it would seem, perhaps at the time of Jawara, there is no question in terms of what our foreign policy orientation was. Whether there is a document that exists which pretty much lays out, our foreign policy position. But what is the foreign policy position, of the country? Given your experience, do you think that at some point we had perhaps put that aside? Or do we have one in existence? What is your take?
Well, we don't have a defined foreign policy. That is a fact. Our foreign policy tend to operate on ad hoc basis. For example, Russia-Africa Summit, everybody just rushed there. But if it is processed in the context of foreign policy, maybe our going there or not going there would take a different form. Because before you rush to a country for a meeting, you must be in a position to assess what your country has achieved so far in relation to that country that will warrant you to get up to go there. So, you see, the problem is the intricacies of diplomacy are too long and many, and maybe too much to discuss in this forum. But there are challenges in the international affairs, and as well as advantages. It depends on our national goals and strategies. So, if you are, for example, if you are going to negotiate or you want to go on a mission to Abu Dhabi, for example, you have to check first how you have been relating to Abu Dhabi over the years as a country or as a government, and what you want to go and achieve from Abu Dhabi. But most importantly, you also have to understand the geopolitical situation of the Gulf. Because we all know that, for example, there is conflict in the Gulf. And Abu Dhabi is in bitter rivalry and competition with Qatar. So, and we have started developing stronger relations with Qatar first. So if you rush to go on a visit to Abu Dhabi, How is that going to impact on the relations with Qatar? So you see, you have to be able to understand this so that you can be able to plan your, missions properly, or so that you can devise your strategy in such a way that it will end up being a win-win situation for you. Because in this case, Qatar can say, so we are helping you, you decided to go to our sort of rivals. So they might hold on to certain things, or they might rethink about their relationship with us and things like that. What I'm just saying is that it takes skills, it takes expertise, it takes knowledge, it takes experience to make a foreign policy work. Foreign policy, actually, in actual terms, when you hear about foreign policy emanates from the president. It does not emanate from the Minister of Foreign Affairs. When the president makes pronouncement on an international issue, it becomes the foreign policy of the country. So here, ours is not laid down on paper as such. It depends on the intentions of the presidency as far as our relations with outside is concerned. So the foreign ministry responds to what the president wants from the international community, or how he sees our relationship with countries abroad. So there could be advices, of course. If I were there, for example, and they want us to rush on certain international arena, I'll have to look at the whole thing in its proper context and give advice before we take off. And I'll make sure that such advice is within the foreign policy objectives of the country. So it is not an easy thing, but as far as I know, we used to have what we call foreign service regulations, that is to guide the diplomatic service, the operations of the diplomatic service. But we also had foreign policy strategy document to tell us why we are abroad, and in each area of the world, what do we want to achieve as a country, and how do we go about it. So all these were spelled out in a strategic document called Foreign Service Strategic Document. Strategy document, yes. So we are guided by that document. So I'm not sure whether in the Second and the Third Republic this document still exists, but there used to be a foreign service strategic document that guides the diplomatic service as to how Gambia should conduct its relations with the outside world. So, but now I'm not sure that such a document exists. So there is no defined foreign policy as such, as far as I know.
I want to come back to the point that you made in terms of the fact that we do not necessarily have a codified foreign policy, a document that we could refer to, albeit the document that you referred to, the foreign policy strategy document that existed at the time, that you are aware of, which you are not sure whether currently exists or not. The point that you made that the President is the owner of foreign policy, and pretty much the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, being an advisor to the President, would perhaps try to implement the foreign policy perspective of the President on behalf of the country. I want to talk on the relevance of documenting a foreign policy, irrespective of the President who is, of the President at the time. Let me just go back to the days of Jawara, since he was our first president. Yes, geopolitical situations change, countries develop, country powers as we know it change as well. You cannot compare the Cold War, for example, to the current situation and the current realities that existed. Times have changed. The Berlin Wall fell in 1991. Russia, USSR as we knew it is no more. Eastern Europe has pretty much broken up, and some of it is now part of Western, I mean Europe through the EU. So things change, but notwithstanding that fact, and I think foreign policy too have to evolve. I mean, and these things are dynamic; they are not static. But if a country does have a codified foreign policy, as it were, irrespective of what president is in play or what president, who the president is, that foreign policy should be the guiding strategy in terms of how the country actually, doles out, as it sees fit, its engagements and trying to win development aspirations for the country. So this idea of the president, the subjectivity in the president being, to control our foreign policy, outlook, I think, I find it very iffy. I think it would be better if we as a country, whoever the president is, sits and develops something. And with time, the president can review and perhaps put back at the level of cabinet for us and get people's inputs and consultations with the people who are the diplomats who are in the foreign service to say, okay, we now want to, for example, do away with our relations with Taiwan and enhance our relationship with China, and these are the reasons why we are going to do it. I think when we put ourselves in such a framework, I think we would score more wins than the manner in which things are currently operating. What's your take on that?
Yes, you are absolutely right, and I'm happy that you have a very good clue of what we are talking about. Well, professionally and diplomatically speaking, foreign policy is based on the national interest, period. And that national interest must be defined, and that national interest that is defined is the one that must be processed through the foreign affairs to our diplomatic missions. So still there is a question of policy document or policy paper coming from the foreign ministry concerning two things: the policy and the strategy. The foreign ministry must go to government or to cabinet with these two policy documents. It's very important. So that since foreign policy is based on the national interest, so when we have interest in any part of the world, or when we are to pursue anything in any part of the world, it would have been based on our foreign policy, but then the strategy would guide us as to how to go about it. So these are two important policy stands that must come up by the government, and the initiative should come from the foreign ministry. Okay. Otherwise, we'll just be assuming, things in the international community and may pursue them wrongly.
I want to get your perspective in terms of some of the recent challenges that has been confronting our diplomacy. Challenges that risk compromising our bilateral and perhaps even our international reputation and standings with our bilateral partners. I give you an example, a case in point. The inappropriate addressing of the People's Republic of China as the Republic of China. The president have made this mistake twice. I call it the sin of omission. When we are forging relations with China and we know China stands on the one China policy, for a country, for a president to have made this mistake and address or refer to the People's Republic of China as the Republic of China. How damaging is that, especially considering the fact that it has not happened once but twice?
Well, it's a major flaw in our diplomatic service. And I think the onus lies more on the foreign ministry to pay attention to it and to make sure that it does not happen again. Because suddenly it cannot be the fault of the president, because the speeches or the letters are all written for the president. And they should emanate from the foreign ministry. So they should check when they are sending these documents to the president to sign them or to sign the communications that will be going out. it is very important that the foreign ministry is alert. But you see, it all boils down again to the question of capacity. It all boils down to the question of diplomatic orientation. If it happens one, you say it's a mistake. But then it happens again, you said it's a mistake. And then what happens? The foreign ministry is obliged to go and make a public press release apologizing to the People's Republic of China for addressing them wrongly. So it shouldn't happen in the first place if people are doing their work. It shouldn't happen. I have made sure that when I was ambassador to China and we have foreign ministry visits, I always warn them that in their statements they should never forget that there is a one China policy, and that should be emphasized. And they should be addressed the People's Republic of China. But if you don't have that knowledge or you don't have that capacity, you will not be able to give proper advice, or you will never be able to send proper communication to the president, and the president will read or say what you have sent to him. So this is why someone somewhere must be able to check the ministries in respect to their submissions to the presidency to make sure that they are in order. You see, again, this lingering question of civil service reform is very imperative. And because in that process, we can make sure that the capacity that is needed, the credibility that is needed, the professionalism that is needed will be injected so that we can inject sense and purpose into the running of the service. And this is very important because we cannot afford to make certain mistakes, especially at the international level. It could cost us a lot. For example, I'm just saying, for example, and I'm not saying this to criticize anybody because I am speaking professionally. I have no interest to blame anybody unnecessarily. I'm just speaking professionally. How can the Indian president be in the Gambia and our president goes to attend another ceremony in another country? That is a serious diplomatic blunder. And that's what they call subtle diplomacy. The Indians may facially show us smiles, but they'll not be happy about it, that their president is in the country and he's not acknowledged until the day of leaving by our president, even though it's a state visit. So they could hold on to certain actions or certain good intentions for the Gambia just because of that flaw. So whatever happened, the president should have been advised that send your vice president to Mauritania. The Mauritanian heads of state knows that you have a visiting head of state. So there is no problem. In fact, some foreign ministers went to attend that ceremony. Not necessarily the president has to be there. You can delegate a vice president. You can send a foreign minister to represent you, because especially when you have a visiting head of state. You see? So such diplomatic flaws should be taken into account and to be avoided next time. So I think most of the fault should not be put on the presidency, because the presidency acts on what is given to them or what they are told, the advice given to them. So this is very important to pay attention to.
Thank you very much. We'll hold that thought and then we'll take a break and then we'll be back shortly.
Come and visit the new Ajib Bank today. Ajib is the only Islamic bank in the Gambia. We offer Sharia compliant services, products and financing modes. Ajib have invested in ultra-modern technology in the state-of-the-art core Islamic banking software IMAL. Ajib ATMs are located in our branches at Banjul, New Joshuan, Brikama, Basse, QCell head office and Brisubi turntable. You can check your balance, withdraw cash, get your mini statement and much more. Ajib also provides 24/7 internet banking, which offers you the comfort of banking from your office or your homes. Come and visit the new Ajib Bank today and enjoy our services delivered by a team of banking professionals. For a limited time, you can get an Ajib ATM card absolutely free. For more information, contact us on 346-6666 or 327-7777. Ajib, your partnership bank.
Welcome back, viewers. Thanks for joining us again. Your Excellency, I want to go to a previous discussion that we were having in terms of diplomacy and the relevance and benefits that we could realize from our diplomacy engagements. Could you share with us the relevance? Because you made the point that it is very important that we go back to career diplomat days, have the relevant training, capacitization, and ensuring that people who are in the diplomatic corps continue to be, rather than it being a dumping ground. Could you share with us, because you've been a diplomat, career diplomat for a very long time, what are some of the benefits, or what are some of the things that the benefits that diplomats have actually brought into the Gambia? I mean, I know I've heard your name everywhere, even before I became minister. And when I became minister, we've seen some of the things that you were able to facilitate for the country. Could you talk to us about that and the relevance of why being a career diplomat and having an understanding of the intricacies of diplomacy is important vis-a-vis the benefits that could be brought into the country by diplomats, especially from the economic and business perspective?
Yes, well, I'm glad you said that, because as you said earlier, times have been changing. Mm-hmm. We have seen changing faces in world politics, including diplomacy. And now we are in an era of economic diplomacy. This is very important for our guys to understand that, you know. So once you have the proper training, diplomatic training, you become skillful and you become knowledgeable about the international scene. So when you find yourself overseas representing your country or pursuing things for your country, you will fairly know how to approach, how to pursue, how to process, and how to achieve at the end of the day what you want. Let me give you one example. Mm-hmm. The former president was invited to visit China, December 15th, 2016. He wrote back and said that because of the elections in the Gambia, he would not be able to make it. They should wait until after the elections, when he is inaugurated, he will visit China. All right. So my first reaction as a trained diplomat, I know that communication was wrong. Because you don't tell China, wait until I'm inaugurated in January, I'll come. You don't know whether you'll be inaugurated in January or not. Mm-hmm. You know, just simply say that you will not be able to honor the invitation due to elections in the Gambia. Period. Mm-hmm. Not to go to the extent of saying, when I'm inaugurated in January, I will come. Now look at what has happened. Mm-hmm. Was he inaugurated? Mm-hmm. You see? So that's first diplomatic flaw. All right. Then I decided to capitalize on that, and I wrote to the government there to say, you extended this invitation to President Jammeh, but unfortunately he could not make it due to elections, and now he is out. I would like the same invitation to be extended to the new president, because I believe it is important to deepen the ties between the two countries with the change of the governments. Mm-hmm. And the reaction was that in 2017, it was late to accommodate visit, because there was queue already until December at the end of the year. So they could not make it. But as a diplomat, I still wanted to achieve something. I wanted to score a goal. Mm-hmm. So I thought about this, and I sought audience to go and see the chief of protocol
of the Chinese government.
Of the Chinese government. I said, well, I have seen your reply. It's unfortunate that you cannot accommodate the visit of my president, because it's almost approaching end of the year, and you have a queue to take care of, you know. But what I want you to understand, or your government to understand, is that in the Gambia we have a new government. the quicker you bring the president of that country to visit China in order to deepen our ties and to engage in other arrangements between us, the better. I said, otherwise, you never can tell. It's a new government. Tomorrow morning, we could hear that Taiwan has taken them over. Mm-hmm. And certainly, they don't want to hear that. Mm-hmm. So I said, this is why I'm insisting that whatever happens, you should squeeze a visit for him, even if it is the tail of the end of the year, for him to come. This is very important. And he looked at me and said, okay, you know what, Ambassador? Give me a day or two. I will consult with my authorities and we'll get back to you. I said, it's better than saying that you cannot accommodate the visit this year. So I went back. And what happened? In 2 days' time, they got back to me and said, okay, we will allow the state visit at the end of December. So he can come. So it takes skills, mm-hmm. It takes knowledge, mm-hmm. It takes, tact
and persistence.
To get results. And this is why the visit took place. Mm-hmm. But that was not, and the correspondence, the communications are all there as my witness. That was not the case before. The case before was that no, it's not possible to visit because, already they have lined up other visits.
So if you have not had experience, or if it was someone that was dumped there for whatever reason,
where he would stop it.
That's where he would stop it.
He would stop it. So this is why I said, skillfulness, knowledge, and experience is very important in the diplomatic service to achieve results for your country. It's very important. It's unfortunate that when that president went to visit China, I was not in the delegation. And yet my counterpart, Senegalese colleague who was in China with me and had gone back to Senegal, when Macky Sall was going, they made sure that he was in the delegation.
Continuity.
That's,
it's diplomacy.
It's diplomacy.
Yeah.
So such a person could further guide you as to what to do when you are out there or what to pursue and so forth, especially when I had taken up certain initiatives. I was the one who initiated the coming of the Chinese doctors to the Gambia. And also to make sure that the money is finalized for the conference center, and so many other projects. You see? But anyway, I'm just telling you that, skillfulness, tact, knowledge are very important tools for a diplomat to be successful in achieving things for your country.
Interesting topic, but we have to move because I know time is running out. I want to discuss the just concluded Russia-Africa summit held in Sochi. And again, we're going back to the issue of geopolitics. This summit was not born out of benevolence on the side of the Russians to the Africans. The realities of the world today, as we say it, and as you have alluded to in our earlier conversation, is that foreign policy is an issue of national interest. So Russia is facilitating this vis-a-vis the African continent, but Russia is looking out for its interest. Actually, I was doing some reading in terms of some of the developments that obtained during the summit, and it was clear the 4 areas that were spelled out in terms of Russia's interest vis-a-vis forging partnerships with Africa. The extractive industries was mentioned. Of course, health, education was also mentioned, and agriculture. Now, the question I want to ask is, are we seeing a rebirth of the scramble for Africa, but in a different context? And here, when I say in a different context, I'm referring to perhaps the pretext of economic hegemony. Now, is Africa, and when I say Africa, I want to make reference to the AU, especially in consideration of the 2063 agenda, the AU 2063 agenda. Is Africa mindful of the interests of Russia as a bloc, the interest of China as another bloc, the interest of the US as another bloc, and of course the interest of the EU, and how everybody is converging to Africa because they see Africa as the next economic development frontier of economic development, and of course necessarily business and economic opportunities. What is your take on this?
Well, I don't think the Russia-Africa summit has any other intentions other than what the other big powers have been doing. I mean, you have to understand the context or the motive for all these summits: Japan, Africa, US, Africa, China, Africa, India, Africa, and now Russia, Africa. Of course, as you rightly said, there is a new scramble for Africa. But these are for only two reasons. There is no other motive or intention. It's only two reasons: economic interest and political interest. Russia, like China, Korea, Japan, America, is also interested in the natural resources of Africa to feed their industries, for their industrial development. But Russia is also interested in getting Africa's support at the international fora, such as the UN and other, arena, to get Africa's support. So, and Russia...
is that on the National Security Council? Or they already sit on the National
Security Council
okay.
of the UN. But they need...
The Security Council of the UN, yes.
Yeah, but they need Africa's support. And for example, Russia has been in a lot of conflict, with America over Syria, Yemen issue, South China issue, so many hot international global issues that Russia is interested in, and Russia...
Afghanistan,
and Russia wants to get international support for its cause. And therefore, Russia needs Africa to be on its side, on her side. So, their pursuit of the summit is only economic and political. Economic because they are equally interested in the resources of Africa, just like any other rich and powerful country. And politically, they need the support of Africa. So, such summits have challenges as well as opportunities. Challenges in the sense that global issues they'll be confronted by global issues, and we have seen the flip-flopping of nation states on various international global issues recently. So they need to take their stance. AU needs to take their stance on a lot of global issues, and so these countries want to canvass the AU to support their cause. All right? So we have to understand it's all about, these two main interests actually. So what is important is that the advantages that are being offered by this summit is what Africa or Gambia must understand, must try to know, must try to recognize, and see how to flex their diplomatic muscle to pursue trade, investment, and business opportunities from Russia out of this summit. But if they go to this summit with no agenda or no goals and objectives, then they'll just be wasting resources of the nation. So it's one thing to go and attend a summit. It's another thing to know why you want to attend a summit and what you want to get out of it, and you prepare yourself accordingly. So this is why the private sector is very important that they are present in all state visits, because they are the engine of economic growth. They move the economy. They create the employment. So it's important that the delegation, the private sector, plays a key role in such missions or summits. Because what we are interested in, for example, Putin has never visited Gambia or Africa anyway, not that I know of. So, and I have not seen the Russian impact in our economy in the Gambia. But he has called for a summit and everybody has rushed there. So there is no harm to rush there, but rush there for a reason. And that reason you have to put it to them. You have your meetings, but engage them on several bilateral areas, in trade, in investment, in business, and try to get something out of them. So at the end of the day, you should be able to achieve something on your return. This is very important.
Let me come to a point that you made in terms of the Russia-Africa summit being a summit of economic and political interest. And I completely concur with you, because even during the Sochi summit, President Putin was explicit in terms of saying that the trade between Russia and Africa had grown over the years, and I believe stands at around 20 billion dollars. Now, if you were to decompose the composition of that trade, I believe a good proportion of it would be defense and security related. And perhaps we would see some in the extractive industries, and perhaps agriculture as well, given Russia's prowess, if you will, in terms of agricultural production, wheat, and the like. But I want to ask this question, because you made the point that when Russia called for the summit, the entire Africa rushed to go and answer to the call of Russia. And you also made the point that we as Gambia, a country, should be alert and also push our national interest. And I share the thinking, and for obvious reasons. But should all the African countries that partook in this summit, should we engage Russia on a country-to-country basis, or since it's a Russia and Africa summit, should the AU take the lead and ensure that whatever interest all the respective African countries has, that these interests are channeled in such a way that we are discussing with Russia in one accord, with one voice, with one interest. Of course, economic and political interest, but somebody facilitating that interest rather than each and every single African country talking on its respective interests. Because we've had the concept of divide and rule. I mean, if Russia should negotiate with every single African country, Russia stands to win. But should Russia negotiate with the AU on behalf of Africa, I think we would win a whole lot more. What's your take on that? And given your experiences?
Well, my take is that there should be a continental position or approach to all summits, whether Russia, Africa, China, India, and everything. I think the AU, because the summits are normally channeled through the AU to the African countries. So really the AU should be the lead. They should be able to get in touch with the African countries to say that China wants to meet us, Russia wants to meet us in a Russia-Africa summit. And to get the position of the individual African countries, put this together to be able to finalize an African position and send this to African countries to know that this is the African position in the forthcoming summit. So that Africa should go there with one voice, one approach, because the continent knows exactly what we need. So, and what we need in that package, you will also be able to know this is what Gambia wants, this is what Nigeria wants, and together, this is the economic, political position of the AU that is representing the entire African continent at this summit. And they go there with one voice, the heads of state, to make sure that they make it clear to Russia that we don't want to buy arms for defense or to kill each other or to fight. No. We want real investments. We want real business. We want real trade in XYZ. So that should sink in Russia's head and to let them know that this is what we want. So that if you want to have access to our resources and you want our political support, these are the needs of the continent. And then, of course, individual countries negotiating with Russia, talking with Russia, that normally takes place in the context of bilateral approach.
Yes.
Not such multilateral levels. But Gambia, for example, can find out during the summit what areas that Russia have talked about that they want to collaborate with Gambia or with Africa. You are saying health, agriculture, this and that. All right? They should be able to find out what possibilities exist there for any help from health or agriculture and so forth, so that when they come back from such summits, we prepare a national, agenda around those sectors and submit it to the Russians and tell them that now this is what we want, to see whether they are sincere about the Russia-Africa Cooperation Pact. Come back, you have known exactly the areas they talked about. Come back, prepare your national agenda, submit it to them, and tell them that this is what you want. And then you look at them. So if there is another second Russia-Africa summit and these things are not fulfilled, your position will depend on whether your felt need has been met or not. And you have to understand one thing. In international politics, no country does something for another country for nothing.
Yes, true.
There is always an agenda, a goal that they are after. So you also must be able to play your cards accordingly. So this is very important. In summary, what I will tell you only, the AU, rather than pushing African countries to answer such to submit, normally they should get a coordinated continental position on how to approach these summits. This is very important. Otherwise, they'll just go and sit down there, listen to Russia, what they have to say. Russia will say, oh, we want to encourage trade, we want to encourage business, we want to encourage this, we have talk, and that's it. At the end of the day, they come back.
We have 5 minutes to go, and I want to get your point on this issue. Still on the issue of summits. We have had a number of summits, as you have outlined. US Africa, China Africa, Japan. Russia Africa, Japan Africa, India Africa as well. 5. Now the question I want to ask is, all of these summits are organized by someone and Africa is invited. Africa is a big boy. Africa is a continent. The AU has AU Agenda 2063. Why is it that we have not seen an Africa-some summit? Meaning Africa organizes a summit out of the 2063 AU agenda and invite partners to come and discuss. Is it because the economic and the financial muscle is not there? Is that the reason? Or could it also happen? What is your take and your advice as a career diplomat extraordinaire?
Well, I think, the problem is we have made ourselves used to being development-driven by outsiders. Outsiders think for us and act for us instead of ourselves thinking for ourselves and acting for us. Normally we have an AU Agenda 2063. I mean, this is what should be sold to these rich and powerful countries. Let them support the Agenda 2063. That's number one. Number two, there was nothing stopping AU from organizing such summit and invite all these world leaders at one time to the Africa World Forum. And they come and you put this Agenda 2063 to them, which captures the economic, the political and social aspects of our needs and aspirations. It should have been done by the AU. But the AU sits down until these big powers get in touch with them and say, we want you to bring your countries to us for a summit. And they send the message around and mobilize people and go. And obviously, I don't know whether it's poverty or greed that makes them rush there or what. But what I'm saying, there is nothing stopping, diplomatically speaking or politically speaking, from AU organizing an Africa World Forum in which all these big players will be invited and Agenda 2063 will be put to them.
And it will also help to promote tourism, my area of interest.
Yes, tourism. Well, tourism.
You'll have how many people flocking?
Yes.
I mean, look at how many people flock to, Sochi, as it were.
Yeah.
Sochi is a tourism initiative of Putin.
Yes.
And they are ensuring that they sell that city as a tourism destination.
Yes.
How many people flocked to Sochi when this summit was called?
This is a way, this summit in Sochi also is a way of enhancing their tourism.
Tourism, of course.
But here, for tourism, we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. Honestly, it should be looked at again very seriously in many aspects for the tourism to work, especially in the light of this Thomas Cook backing out and its implications
on the economy
and this season that is coming. It's very important that the tourism authorities look into it and see what can be done quickly. But this is what will happen to us because, in my view, that's my view. You see, we neglected our main source and initial source of tourism. You know, our main and initial source of tourism was Scandinavia. Before even moving to England, was Scandinavia. And we had all these fine tour operators from Scandinavia and flights, everything coming to Gambia regularly, and even women and men in Bakau were speaking Swedish and all these things. Then these things started drifting to England, and England mounting up Gambia experience that it was exploiting us, and then Thomas Cook and all these things. Now Thomas Cook all of a sudden withdrew, and it's leading to a big havoc in our industry. So that one needs to be looked at carefully.
Well, Your Excellency, thank you very much for joining us during this 1 hour. It was quite an intriguing and fruitful discussion. We are very appreciative of you honoring our invitation, and we hope that we'll invite you again because we've got a lot of things to discuss. So we hope that we'll see you again at another invitation.
Thank you very much.
Well, viewers, thank you very much. This was all we had for you. Quite an insightful and exciting discussion we had on diplomacy and what we should be looking at as a country. Until we come your time next way, goodbye and bye for now.